So you're given this particular array and you have to return an array with all the elements inside of this array squared. As you all can see, the expected output is on the right hand side of your screen. Give it a moment. Okay, so it's pretty easy. All you got to do is create a results variable and we'll do numbers dot map. Okay, and over here we just need the element inside the callback function, which is the first parameter. Okay, and then all we got to do is el times el because we have to return the square, right? And let us quickly console log this result. And if you see, we should get the expected output. Now let's move on to question 2. Okay, so we are given this array of objects and the ask is that you have to return an array with all the first name properties only. As you all can see, the expected output will be on the right hand side of your screen. Give it a moment. Okay, so let's call this results again. And what we'll do is we'll again be using map over here. And again, we'll just use the first value of the callback function. Let's call it el. Okay. And over here, what do we want? We just want the first name. Okay, so we'll do el dot first. Okay, and that should give us our result. As you can see, we are getting the expected result. So let's move on to question 3 now. Okay, so as you can see, we are given an array of strings, and all these strings are basically names. The expected output is we want to return the same array but with the first letter of each of these names as capitalized. The expected output, as always, is on the right hand side of your screen. So give it a moment. Okay, so this is a slightly tricky question because this uses more than just map. We even use string methods. If you all have any question related to string methods, I've already created some of the most used string methods. Link is in the description. So do check it out. We'll start by creating a variable called results, and now we'll do names.map. Okay, why are we using map? Because we want to iterate over each of these elements and we want to perform some kind of a transformation. Right now, we'll access each of these with our this element value. Okay, now el is first over here. It will first reach Walter. Okay, now one thing to keep in mind is each of these individual strings, right? If you take Walter for example, Walter is a string and string values have indices, right? For example, W is at index 0, A is at index 1, L is at index 2, so on and so forth. So I want to convert just the first letter to uppercase, right? And if you think about it, that is what we have to do. The remaining ones other than the first one have to be in lowercase the way that they are, right? Only the first one has to be converted to uppercase, right? So first we have to access that, right? And how will we access it? As I mentioned, these are indexed. String values are indexed, right? So if I do something like el, we have this bracket notation, and then if you do 0, it will give me the element. For example, el gives me Walter, right? But el of 0 will give me the first element inside Walter, which is W. Okay, and now we want to capitalize it. How will we do that? We'll do that using the method to uppercase. Okay, now is that all we need to do? No, we also need the remaining string, right? So how will we access that? Is we'll do el dot slice, but we want to slice from where? Right, we want to slice from the first index, right? So we'll add 1, and we don't need to add the end index because that is optional. If you don't add that, it will get all the remaining elements. Okay, and this should do the job. Okay, so let's quickly log the result variable, and as you all can see, we have achieved our use case. Now let's move on to question number 4. So over here we are given an array of numbers again, and what we have to do is we have to return an array with only the even numbers. Okay, and as you all can see, the expected output is on the right side of your screen. So give it a moment. Okay, so this is again a pretty easy question. So all you got to do is create a variable, and now over here we want to use map. We'll use filter, right? Because we want to apply a filtering condition because we only want the even numbers. Okay, so the way we do that is el, and then we'll do mod of 2, and if that is equal to 0 means the number is even, so we'll take that, else we'll reject that. Okay, and again this should give us our expected result. So as you can see, 2, 4, and 6 are the even numbers. Now let's move on to question number 5. Okay, so over here we have an array of objects, right? And the condition is we want to return only those objects whose age is greater than 40. Ready? Okay, so again, we'll use filter over here. Okay, let me first create a variable greater than 40. You can call it anything, even result is fine. Okay, but the key is we want to use filter over here because again, I said I want elements greater than 40, right? So again, what we'll do is el and then el dot age, right, greater than 40. And again, this should give me my result. Sorry for that. as you can see, we get two objects, Walter and Mike. Okay, now let's move on to question 6, which is an improvement on this question. So the expected output now is that we want to return just the names, okay, just the first names of those elements whose age is greater than 40. Give it a moment. Okay, so all we got to do is add a map over here, and this will help us get our desired result. So the way we will do that is el dot first name. Sorry for that. Okay, and if we log this, we should get the desired result. So now let's move on to the next question. So over here we have a numbers array with, of course, numbers inside of it, and we have to return the sum of all these numbers. The expected output is on the right hand side of your screen. So give it a moment. So this is a very standard problem we face when we learn how to use reduce in JavaScript. So what we'll do is, okay, let's call it sum, right? And what we'll do is we'll do numbers dot reduce, okay? And reduce, as we know, takes two values. One is a callback function, right? Let me quickly add that over here, okay? And the second value over here is its starting value of the accumulator, right? Which is 0, okay? So I am keeping it 0 because we want to return the sum over here, okay? And it takes two elements, ECC and current, right? And basically what we want to do is ECC plus current, okay? And as you all can see, we should get the result after logging this, okay? So as you all can see, we get the expected output. So let's move on to the next question. So over here we are given an array of names, and we have the values Virat, Michael, Michael again, and Tilak. Okay, now the expected result, as you all can see on the right hand side, is we have to return an object wherein the key, okay, is the name and the value is the number of occurrences. So as you all can see, Virat has occurred one time, Michael has occurred twice, Tilak has occurred once. Okay, so give it a try. Okay, so over here we'll be using reduce. Okay, so now people have this common misconception that reduce can only be used if you want to return a single number. Okay, but remember, reduce can be used when you have to return even a single array, a single object, or even a single number, as we did in the previous question. Okay, so over here we want to return a single object with the occurrences, so we'll use reduce over here. Okay, of course, now reduce takes two things, right? One is the callback function. Okay, let me quickly add that particular callback function. Okay, and it also takes the default value. Okay, the default value of what? The accumulator. Okay, now if you all remember, in the previous question over here where we have added this empty object, we had added 0 because we wanted to return a number which was a sum, right? And over here we want to return an object, and hence the default value of this accumulator will be an empty object. Okay, now this callback function, again, it has two things, the accumulator and the current. Okay, now let's jump into the logic. Okay, so we first want to check, right, if that particular key is present or not. Okay, so the way we would do that is using an if condition. So what we'll do is we'll check, okay, if ECC of cur, does it exist? Okay, if it does exist, what we want to do is we want to take that particular element and add 1 to its value. Okay, so the way we would do that is in the following way. Okay, now that is if it is already there. Okay, but what if it is not there? In that case, all we got to do is we'll take that particular element and we'll add it using this syntax, and we'll assign it the value 1. Okay, now will this give me the answer? Okay, let me just quickly console log this as well. Okay, now question is, will this give me the answer? No, it will not, because we also need to return our final value of the accumulator, as we have used curly braces over here. Okay, let me show that to you as well. Okay, so as you can see, we are getting this error, right? And why we are getting this? Because we haven't done this thing. We need to do return ECC, and this will give us our expected result. Okay, as we can see, Virat is once, Michael is twice, Tilak is once. Now, if you don't want to use the if else condition, you all can even do this using the or operator. Okay, but that solution is slightly tricky. Okay, so this, if you all don't understand that, you all can use this because this is much more easier to understand. But you all can even do this using the or operator. So the way you would do that is in the similar way. You would do ACC cur. Okay, and now what we would do is we would do ACC cur. Okay, and now we want to return 0 if this does not exist. Okay, and then we want to do +1. Okay, so this will give us the same result. Okay, this is just an alternative solution. You all can even do that using the if else, which is much more easier to understand. So let's move on to the final question. Over here we have an array of objects with two properties, first name and age, and the expected output is that we want to return the sum of all the people's ages whose age is less than 40. Okay, so the expected output is on the right side. Okay, so give it a moment. Okay, So this is again a very simple one. Over here, we know how to calculate the sum, correct? We learned it 2 questions back, right? But over here, the only additional condition is we want to get only those values who are less than 40. How do we do that? Using filter, right? So over here in this question, we'll use first filter to get only those objects whose values for age is less than 40, and then we'll simply use reduce on that. Okay, so let's quickly do that. People.filter el, where el of age is less than 40. Okay, now that we have gotten those values, all we got to do is use reduce on them. Okay, so again, reduce has two things: the callback function that will have two things, the accumulator and the current element. Okay, and not just this, we also need to add the default value of the accumulator, which in this case is 0, because we want to return the sum of all the ages, which will be a single number, and hence the default value of the accumulator will be 0. Okay, now all we got to do is acc.cur. Oh no, we need to do cur dot age, because this is an object. If you do cur, it will return the entire object, which will have first name as well as age, and you will get an answer, I guess, object, if I'm not wrong. Okay, so let's quickly console log that. Okay, so you can see we are getting the desired result. Let me also show you what will happen if you forget to add this age property. You will get something like this, right? Okay, which is pretty strange, right? Thanks for watching. Hope you all enjoyed this video. Do take a look at the other videos on my channel and let me know if you'll want to have a part 2 of this video. There were just limited questions that I covered over here. We can cover even more advanced questions that I still have in my list. And yeah, just let me know if you'll want that. Have a great day, and yeah, once again, thanks for watching.